Hello, everyone. I'm Marcus Cook. I am Principal Marketing Representative for the Capital Corridor. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming you to a presentation of our draft annual business plan. This is covering years FY 2022-23 and 23-24. I'm joined with my colleagues today who will present highlights from the draft business plan. Our Managing Director, Rob Padgett, Deputy Director, Leo Sanchez, and Manager of Planning, Jim Allison. Before we get into today's presentation, I did want to go over just some housekeeping items. All participants are going to be muted. Again, just for the purpose of being able to get all of the comments documented. The cameras are going to be off for all of the participants, and the chat feature for this presentation is going to be used really to give you some tips and resources as we make reference to different projects and resources that are going to be available to you during the presentation. So we do ask that you use the Q&A feature for any comments that you have, any questions that you have. We will do our best to try to address all these comments and questions during today's presentation. Anything that we are unable to address, we will follow up in a future version of our business plan. So do know that we will address all comments and questions. We may not be able to get through all of them today, but we do invite you to participate. I will get those Q&As in as I can, or we'll touch on those towards the end of the presentation. And with that, I will hand things over to Rob Padgett.
Thanks, Marcus, and thanks to everyone who is able to join us today. We hope that the next time we do this, we will see you on the train. For those of you who participated over the last number of years, we typically have a mix of in-person on the train events, and we started Facebook Live, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, and did that a couple years, and then moved over to this format as a result of the pandemic. This is a really great opportunity for us to hear from our customers and stakeholders as we prepare our draft business plan. And we do this in preparation for a request to the state of California for funding for our service over the coming year. And this document provides our detailed request and activities that we plan over the course of 2 years. In terms of timing, as Marcus mentioned, the business plan has been posted on our website. We're having a series of webinars this week to provide somewhat of an overview of the business plan. And then we are asking for comments from everybody by Friday of this week. And we realize it's a little bit of a tight turnaround, but understand that our goal in getting comments this week is to be able to provide the Capital Corridor Board with a summary of comments, but also to respond to your comments. So we respond to each of those. We provide that summary document to the Capital Corridor Board, and it very much has an influence over how we prepare the document. So I appreciate your feedback. And then we'll present a final draft to the board for approval at the February 16th board meeting. You can go on to the next slide, please. And I won't read through this whole list here, but this shows you the broad content of the business plan. We'll talk today about our operations, our plans for that over the coming fiscal year, the affairs for the fiscal year, a lot of the projects that we're working on, both to improve customer service, but also to expand and improve the reliability of our service. And we'll cover all that in the presentation today. Next slide, please. So before we start talking about next year, I want to talk about where we are or where we were in 2021. We had a year that was very much impacted by the pandemic. Our ridership was 354,000 in FY 2021. That compares to about 1.8 million pre-COVID. We generated $8.8 million in revenue. That compares to $37.5 million before the pandemic. And on a really positive note, we hit 90% on-time performance, which was the first time we'd hit that level of performance in several years. And we think that was due in large part to some changes we made to the schedule to address some built-in conflicts that were creating some common on-time performance issues. We've had a rough couple of months since the end of the fiscal year, which our new fiscal year started October 1st. And we're working aggressively to do everything in our power to make that number better. Next slide, please. So one thing we wanted to share with you today is a summary of our ridership, and we typically do a survey every year, an onboard survey. We skipped 2020 due to the pandemic, but we did do one this past summer, and this gives you a summary of what we learned from that survey. The one really interesting thing in that survey is that we now see about 2/3 of our customers are riding on just a single ride or a round trip ticket. Pre-COVID, that was only about half of our customers were doing that. So half of our customers were either on a monthly ticket or a 10-ride ticket. So we're going to keep our eyes on that number as our ridership recovers, because that does have implications for how we interact with our customers and our fare policies as well. The mode split, the access that people have to get to the station, we continue to see a real mix. So we have a lot of customers that are coming by bike, by transit, walking, driving, getting a ride to the station. We really make sure that all of our stations are accessible by all modes of transportation. That broadens the reach of our service, and we certainly want to continue to support that. And we can see here that our customers need that broad capture. And in terms of rider profile, the other big change that we've seen since the pandemic started is now about half of our trips are work related. That was about 70% pre-COVID. So that probably means a few things. One, it means that work trips in general are just less. We're seeing a lot of people still working remotely. A lot of employers aren't back. There are not as many conferences or work-related travel still. And our friends and family visits, our leisure trips are still significant. We think some of that market has held up a little bit more, and people really depend on our service. Next slide.
And Rob, we did have a question that came in, and this might be a good time for it. This is in regards to the distribution of the plan and who actually gets eyes on it. And there's a question with regards to, would this document, for example, be sent before the Biden administration, possibly as even a funding or additional funding opportunity for the state of California?
Well, I would say that when we're applying for funding, it's usually specific to a project that's in our plan. And one of the things that they will look at is whether your project that you're seeking federal funding for is a part of a broader plan. And because we're, and Jim will talk more specifics about projects later, but because the projects we will be seeking funding for are part of a vision plan and part of our business plan and part of a statewide rail plan, all those things make it clear to the federal government that that the project is coming from a broader system improvement effort on the part of Capital Corridor. I will say also that the Biden administration, FRA, has been looking at the state of California as a model. The state rail plan in California is considered one of the strongest in the country. It sets a real path forward for how we want to invest rail dollars in the state. And this business plan really folds up to that larger statewide effort to improve rail across California.
Thank you.
Sure thing. And then before I turn it over to Leo, who will talk about our service plans this year, I want to say that this year's business plan comes with a lot of caveats. We are not back at full service yet, and you'll hear a little bit more of that. Our service typically relies on fare revenue to cover a large share of our operating costs. Pre-COVID, we were at 60% of our operating costs covered by revenue. Our revenue, as I mentioned earlier, is only $8.8 million in FY21 as compared to $37.5 million pre-COVID. That's gonna play a big role in how quickly we can bring back our service. And you can see here our estimates of where we think ridership is going to go. We're right now at about 35 to 40% of pre-COVID ridership. We had been growing through really late November of 2021, and with this latest surge in COVID cases, we've seen, like lots of businesses, a real decline over the last month or so. We think that's going to come back pretty quickly. But I will just say that this plays a big role in our funding projections and will play a big role in how quickly we resume our service. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leo, who's going to talk about what's in our business plan with regards to service for the coming fiscal year.
Great. Thank you, Rob. We can go to the next slide, please. So first, what I want to do is talk a little bit about where we have been and the direction we're headed. So pre-pandemic, our pre-pandemic service was 30 weekday trains and 22 weekend trains. Shortly after the shelter-in-place order that took effect in the Bay Area, we drastically reduced our service down to 10 trains every day of the week. Slowly, we have incrementally added service. You can see closer to the right-hand side where we're at today, we're running 22 weekday trains now and 18 weekend trains. And we are planning with this annual business plan submission that we're presenting to the board this coming February to go back up to our pre-pandemic service levels of 30 weekday trains and 22 weekend trains. Next slide. And just to give you a detailed view of what that means today and down into the future on October 1st. So our connections between Sacramento, I'll start with what stayed the same for most of the pandemic, and then I'll talk about some of the things that are going to be changing. So Sacramento, Roseville to Auburn, we have maintained the same levels of service. So we have 2 daily trains to each one of those, and we're planning to continue the same for our upcoming new fiscal year. And as far as Oakland to San Jose, we are currently running 12 weekday trains, and we're actually running 14 weekend trains. So our weekend service actually does have our full service restored. We'll make the correction on this slide here. And then looking at our service between Sacramento and Oakland, you can see we have 22 weekday trains there, 18 weekend trains there, and our full service levels on the right-hand side. Next slide.
Leo, before we leave this slide, the question about schedules becomes a very hot topic for our followers. And I do have a question about the pre-pandemic service levels. Do we anticipate instituting the pulse schedule as well as returning to service some weeknight and weekend night service, like a 9 p.m. departure from San Jose, for example, and a 10 p.m. departure from Oakland Coliseum back to Sacramento, or even vice versa?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first I'll start by talking about a schedule change that we made last year. We actually did go to a pulse pattern schedule, and that's in an effort to have a more predictable schedule for our riders, and then just have more seamless connection with some of our transit agency partners, including BART. And one of the things that I'll say is that we do have an upcoming schedule change, not in the amount of service that we're running, but just in the slots that we're operating this coming Monday, January 24th. And so one of the things that you will see is that we will have the train 548, which departs Oakland at 8 p.m. So that will be, a nice add that will, improve some of the later service. And then we'll be just looking to see what opportunities we have, if any, before the full service restoration. But just keep in mind that we are planning to fully restore our service October 1st.
Great. And then one follow-up question about connectivity, and this is particularly pertaining to BART. With BART returning to 5-line service on Sundays and service closing at midnight on all days starting on Valentine's Day, how will Capital Corridor realign the daily schedule to better connect to and from BART's upcoming expanded schedule? And I think we'll stop there.
Hey, and Leo, if I can jump in, I wanted to add a little bit to the last question. In terms of the late night service, so the challenge we have south of Oakland is that south of Oakland, we are limited in our agreement with Union Pacific to 7 round trips daily. And we have to make really hard choices about when we use those slots and to support as many customers as is possible. And the schedule change we made did a couple things. One is it fixed some problems we had, and there's a large section of that south of Oakland that's single track territory, which means trains have to be, the scheduling that is extremely challenging. And so we dealt with some problems we had in the previous schedule. And we did not find that those later night trains out of San Jose were busy on most nights. In fact, we would sometimes only have 10 people a total on those trains. And so what we've done with this new schedule change is we've targeted places in the day and closed some gaps in service where we do have more demand for the service. And our long-term goal is to expand the service south of Oakland, as is outlined in our vision plan, and to expand our service between Roseville and Sacramento outside of the Roseville area. So just to add on to that. And remind me again, what was the last follow-up question,
Yeah, the
Marcus?
follow-up question was about connectivity with BART, since they are going to be changing their schedule, having more frequencies on Sundays again, and also expanded service hours. How are we going to better align with them?
You want to cover that, Leo?
Yeah, I can jump into this one. So one of the things that we actually did that came up previously was about the connections with BART, specifically Richmond and Oakland Coliseum. For those of you that may not be familiar with those connections, those are two good connections that we have with our partners at BART. And there was a concern previously about some of the connectivity at Richmond Station. And one of the things that I think this new schedule will do is actually allow for better connectivity even on the later trains, because generally those are the ones that are tougher just because there's lower frequency at the later hours. So I think that'll actually improve things for us. One of the things that we worked during the last schedule change was to actually try to have more seamless connections with BART. So for the most part, most of the connections are between 5 and 7 minutes to transfer. And we are currently reviewing the upcoming schedule change with BART just to see how that affects us, if any. And so I'll keep you all posted on what that looks like. So that'll be more of a follow-up on that one, Marcus.
Okay. And just one last quick question about BART. Someone's curious about what our relationship is like with BART. If you can just describe that kind of at a high level, as far as, do we, relatively plan around their schedule, or is it the other way around? And, are we on good terms? And what does future collaboration maybe look like?
Yeah, maybe I'll touch on that. And one thing to note is that we have the Capital Corridor Board has an agreement with the BART Board that is called an Administrative Services Agreement, and that allows us to be hosted at BART. And so we benefit from some of the services that BART has, like procurement services, human resources, that allows us to be very nimble, small agency that oversees this service. And the other really great thing about that is it means that we share office space with BART. So if Leo has a question about servicing, he can literally walk down the hall and talk to them about it. And our relationship with BART couldn't be better. In terms of the schedule changes and how we do that, we operate on Union Pacific territory. And so what that means is our ability to control our schedules is requires a very close cooperation and approval by Union Pacific, and it does limit our flexibility, and it also makes any kind of schedule change take a lot of time. And so our schedules are not particularly flexible, but we do coordinate closely with BART, and we also communicate, and we've pushed out some recent communications that shares with customers which of our trains, what's exactly the spacing of the connections at Richmond Station. So is it 7 minutes? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? So that people can make informed decisions about which of our trains they take if they're heading into other parts of the Bay Area that require a transfer over to BART.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to jump into this next section that will also talk about some of the things that we're working through that are some of the challenges to get back to that full pre-pandemic service that we're all wanting and ready for. The first one is, as today, we're watching very closely the public health conditions and see what that means for our riders, for the employees that provide the service. So that is one of the things that we're watching closely. And, there's been so many ups and downs with COVID since the start of the pandemic. So some of it has been very unpredictable, as you all know, but we're going to stay closely connected to that and see how that looks as we get closer to the fall. The next bullet is about workforce availability. A couple of challenges there. One directly related to COVID and just seeing how that affects the staff itself and staff availability as it pertains to their health. But the second one is just the current challenging job market that we have. So we are working, and Amtrak is working to fill positions and staff up and be ready for service increases, but that is one of the things that we're looking at closely. The next point, which I believe was also a question that was asked, was on equipment availability. And so we do have additional equipment that the state of California is procuring that will come to the San Joaquins that will free up additional equipment that will allow us to be able to get up to that full pre-pandemic service levels. So as to answer the question, we're expecting that the first set is deployed on the San Joaquin side sometime in the spring. We'll be looking to see if we have a better timeline that we might be able to provide, but there have been some challenges, and so I'll be speaking directly with them and just to see how things are progressing. And then the last one, and an important one, is how our budget and funding resources look like. And just we need to make sure that we have the funding and the revenue adequate to be able to support a full pre-pandemic service level. Next slide. To build off of the current challenges with COVID, immediately after the shelter-in-place orders, we did implement safety standards, cleaning procedures, and we're going to continue those throughout the entirety of the pandemic and beyond. We're continuing to explore additional sanitation technology that can help us in this battle. And so if any of you have any questions, any comments or any suggestions as to how we improve that, we're more than willing to explore different options. And then lastly, for those of you that have been riding, masks are required while you're riding with us. We're continuing to follow the federal mask mandate, and we'll continue to do that until it is safe to relax some of those guidelines. Next slide. On safety and security, we've been working for a number of years with California Operation Lifesaver outreach. The safety on our corridor is top of mind, and it's definitely at the top of our focus for this next fiscal year. We've had just a challenging year, and part of why we've had a decrease in our on-time performance is because of some of the challenges along our right-of-way. So we're going to continue some of our cleanup efforts on the right-of-way and securing the right-of-way via fencing and other areas like that. And I am excited to announce that we are going to be bringing on a couple of special agents from Union Pacific that are going to help in securing the right-of-way. So that should be coming in the next few months. And then lastly, we've been doing a lot of work on grade crossing analysis, and we're going to be engaging stakeholders along our route in order to be able to make some improvements along the right-of-way, specifically addressing some of the grade crossing issues that we see today. And then the last thing that I'll add that supports that is that there's a lot of funding at the federal level that's going to be available. And so we're going to be looking to explore a lot of those options in order to be able to make some significant improvements, grade crossing improvements along our route.
And Leo, if I can add to that, that's a really important point to make, is that the funding for those grade crossing programs has been fairly anemic for a number of years. And the infrastructure package that was passed last year provides a huge increase in funding sources. And one of the things that's really important for everyone on this call to know is that the community that is in charge of the roadway that crosses the grade crossings is the community that would be able to tackle that and move forward. It may be the state, it may be a city, and there are some improvements that are underway that are designed. I know Yolo County has worked on one that's up near Sacramento. The city of Berkeley has a couple that are getting ready to happen very soon. They've been very aggressive about fixing some of these challenges. This is a big challenge for us on our corridor. We care more about safety than anything else. And what we want to do is put in front of our stakeholders all this data that we have about the seriousness of the grade crossing, so that they understand and can take advantage of these resources that are now available at the federal level. And so we're going to really push hard on that topic this year. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
that was a good point. Thank you, Rob. Next slide.
Before we move on, Leo, we did have a question that came in about health and safety. Could you talk about the current cleaning procedures and what the new sanitation technology is that you alluded to? Do BART or any other partners use the same procedure?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I can follow up with the specifics as far as maybe some of the details, but just at a high level, some of the things that happen is that we do fog onboard the equipment as it comes in for servicing. So what that does is, we're obviously trying to sanitize as best as we can, not just on wiping the surfaces, but also on the air that's on board on the rail cars. And then as far as what we're exploring for sanitation technology, we've looked at different types of filtration technology. It's still a little bit unclear as to what is our best recourse that we can take that can improve that. And one of the things that I'll share that I know about BART and what they're doing that is a bit of a challenge based on our equipment and how the specifications of our equipment is that they use MERV 13 filter technology, which is a high filtration HEPA filter type technology that allows them to filter their onboard air. Unfortunately, because of the limitations of our HVAC systems, they really can't handle that high MERV filter. So we're looking to see what other type of options we can do similar to that. We've explored different things like blue filter technology that Wabtec provides. We've looked at infrared technology. So we're still exploring a variety of options, and Caltrans is actually helping with the direct research and engineering work to try to figure out what the best solution can be.
Great, thanks, Leo.
So moving on to rolling stock improvements. For those of you that followed us last year, we talked a little bit about renewable diesel. We were starting some of the work on testing and piloting renewable diesel. That the actual testing phase of it has run its course, and we've actually completed it. We're just performing now analysis and some of the finishing touch-up work to get the final certification from both the manufacturers and then also eventually get EPA certification to transition fully to renewable diesel for the entirety of our fleet. So that is an exciting thing that should be coming in the next few months and certainly during the next fiscal year. Like I mentioned before, I touched on the additional rolling stock that we need in order to be able to run our full service. So that will be coming by way of San Joaquin with the equipment that they'll be getting from the state of California. And then just to highlight one other point, we are working on a truck overhaul. And essentially what that is a suspension improvement of the rail cars, and that'll give a better ride quality for all of you riding with us. Next slide. And I'll go ahead and hand it off here to Jim Allison.
Hello all, thank you for joining today. I'm going to talk about some of our service amenities and then some of our capital projects. First off, the service amenities are generally what you're going to experience on the train or at a station. And one of the things that we're starting off with here this year, it's been underway, but we're updating the back end. In other words, the communication side, the software, and all those kind of things of our passenger information display system. So the signs and audio announcement pieces won't change, but everything behind them is going to be updated. And they haven't been updated since they were installed really in the early 2000s. So the means of communication has gotten less expensive, and we can update a number of things. And eventually we'll replace those signs, but they still have some years of life in them. So that's going to be happening, but that will be a hard one to see and feel. But this information also drives our information on where trains are on our website and the GTFS system and everything else like that that you use to see trains. So it's a big behind the scenes upgrade. The major thing that we're working on for this next year is our role in the California Integrated Travel Program. Capital Corridor is involved in the whole program from a state level overall, but specific to rail, we are going to be launching a pilot program on the Capital Corridor in late 2022, possibly early 2023, that will really change the experience of riding Capital Corridor. And what I mean by that, by changing the experience, it's a change in how you purchase tickets. You won't necessarily have to use the Amtrak app. You won't have to buy a paper ticket. You can use your smartphone or EMV activated credit card, and you just wave it and go sit down. The conductor will come by and check to make sure you have a valid credit card, and then you check out as you leave the train. So there's no upfront payment, and this can fundamentally change how and lower the costs for collecting fares, because there is a cost to collecting fares as we have it today. So it's a major change. It's going to be rolled out with a small pilot group of folks that ride often, and then eventually, as that proves successful or gets tweaked over time to make it better, then we'll roll it out to more and more folks, and there'll be other aspects of the payment process that will improve, including the ability to do pay-as-you-go, which is a way of paying, and the more times you ride, it gets cheaper and cheaper until you've reached essentially the cost of a monthly pass. So it's a very successful program. It is pay-as-you-go, and it's been used in London and many other places around the world. So we're adopting that here, and it's a very exciting program for us to move ahead. So look for more announcements about that, including how to be a participant in that pilot trial coming up. Then rest of the items on here aren't going to be as monumental a change as what I just talked about. The Wi-Fi upgrade, that's already happened. Those of you who are on the train, you might find that this experience was a little snappier because there's less competition for the resources on the train. You know, as we get more ridership, that will slow down slightly, but we're working as best we can to keep it as a good experience for all. We will continue evolving the Wi-Fi landing page over time, and we are adding new features this week, in fact, to bring some entertainment, TV shows and other things like that to the Wi-Fi landing page. On bicycle access, we are continuing to work to improve the capacity in the train and the methods of mounting your bike to the train, making it as easy as possible. So those improvements are coming over time. We've been testing with a number of them, but the sort of urgency with the pandemic has come out of it because we're not as impacted with bike storage challenges as we used to have. Then finally, on the food service, as health and safety conditions permit, we're going to be gradually expanding the food service options available. Right now, you can still get the beer and like the snack packs, but gradually we would expect a relaxation and a return to normalcy, which would be very welcome by all. We can go to the next slide, please. Thanks.
And Jim, before we move forward, just one note to all the participants. You've been so great. You've asked so many great questions. Again, if you do have a comment or a question, please use the Q&A for those. We want to see those coming in. And then Jim, of course, we do have a question about Cal ITP. So with this project, will passengers still be able to pay the way they do today and earn Amtrak Guest Rewards points, or will that go away when using Capital Corridor? I would hope not.
Okay, well, we're not taking away the Amtrak option of ticketing with Cal ITP. That would remain in place, and you can still earn guest rewards through that program. But Cal ITP will be a fundamentally different payment program than that. So we would look towards moving towards a Capital Corridor rewards program, and we're developing the specifications around that. But if you do shift to Cal ITP, it will be very difficult to make it go towards Amtrak guest rewards. We're not saying that it can't happen, but it would be very challenging to do that. So that's the quick answer. So there'll be a transitional period. So,
and then a reminder to, if you have not signed up for the Capital Corridor Rewards program, you should definitely go do that. And that's free. And there's lots of good stuff that's going to come out of that in the coming months.
We'll probably put a link up for that. So, so with that, if it's okay, we'll move to the next slide. Thanks. So the next bit is about service reliability. These aren't the big capital projects that get us new expansions of service, but they're to make the service that we have run today much more efficient. And there's three of them that we wanted to highlight. One of them is at the Agnew siding. That is a new siding roughly in the area of the Levi Stadium. So right next to that stadium, it does a couple things. It helps break up a long stretch of single track so that if you were wanting to go get that train going on time, you couldn't leave until a train was through that single track. So this gives it a chance to run two trains, let them pass each other at the siding, and keep them more on time than they otherwise would have been. It also allows us to put special trains to serve Levi Stadium special events. We can store a train there ready to go to pick people up as soon as the game or the event is done. The next project is between like Berkeley and Richmond, is to replace and upgrade some signals that do need replacement. And this will allow us to get greater reliability with a new modern signal system on the Union Pacific Territory. And then finally, on the Davis interlocking project and signal replacement, this is a project that is also upgrading the signal system, but moving it slightly to the side of where it is today, thus allowing a future station improvement and track platform improvement at the Davis station. So maybe next year from now, we'll be talking about the Davis upgrade and platform project. But this is a move to get ready for that coming up. And if we can go to the next slide, this is where the big dollars are spent and the big efforts are. This is service expansion, and we have two main, more current on the way projects, and then we have finally a longer term project, which is Link 21. So I'll start with Sacramento to Roseville. We've had many business plans where the Sacramento to Roseville project was in them, and we are constantly working to implement that project. It will continue in this next plan, but we are now into 30% plans with Union Pacific, and finding and gathering the final funding to implement the Sacramento to Roseville service, which will take us from the current 1 round trip and give us the capacity to add 2 more round trips. So we get to 3 round trips daily to and from Roseville. So those trains that today stop in Sacramento, generally around the peak hour times, or start in Sacramento, a few of them will continue on or stop and start at Roseville. So they'll just be extensions of what we do today in Sacramento. Again, a few of those moving up to Roseville. This will be a monumental change for that market and give a lot more choices to Southern Placer County to get to the Bay Area and see family, friends, do work, go on business trips in the future. The next project is the South Bay Connect project. That is a rerouting project that kind of unscrambles some of the spaghetti around where freight trains go or want to go and where passenger trains go. It's a shift of our service to what's called the Coast Subdivision, and you can kind of see that outlined in the green line there. And it would include a new station at Ardenwood. But as you shift, of course, then you're going to not be serving the Hayward and Fremont Centerville stations. So while we lose service to those stations, we find a happy medium at Ardenwood, which has really good connections to the peninsula. And there's a tremendous number of transit buses, that both public and private buses, that go to work centers right at the Ardenwood station is where Highway 84 is. So we're working on a project to connect the rail and future transit buses in an even more efficient way to serve that market. So plus there's a travel time savings. So it's a win-win-win all around. It reduces freight train congestion and should improve the connectivity and viability of Capitol Corridor as a viable travel option, which gets you to the peninsula, which was previously pretty difficult to get to. The final program is the Link 21 program. You'll see a slightly dashed little curved line, green line, leaving San Francisco heading to the East Bay. That is just the very start of everything around Link 21. The Link 21 concept is really mega regional in scale, and by adding in a connection for heavy rail into San Francisco, you really have to look at all the markets around Northern California that might want to use that and how that would transform rail in Northern California. So while it just looks like a simple line, it's really just it's not a simple line by any means, because of, constructing a tube and a way in and out of San Francisco into the East Bay is a challenge of itself. But to support that, you need to expand service across Northern California and transform what rail can be for transportation options, all the way from Auburn down into Salinas. It's really a 21 county, and that's the 21 21 county effort to transform rail in Northern California. And there's the website there, link21program.org. That is going to be an effort that's going to be ongoing for years and years. It's because it's that complex. It's a very big push. So if there's no questions, I think it's time to hand off to marketing.
Oh, but we have a question.
We have a question. All right. I would guess.
So this is in regards to the SAC Roseville third track phase 1, and really the entire project. If you initially, get 3 round trips to Roseville from what we have today, what, if you could imagine, would be the ideal departure and arrival times, both to Sacramento and Roseville? If you just had an idea of what that might look like. Sure.
Well, generally what we're going to do, we have the 1 round trip now. What we would generally look to do is to make a slightly earlier trip and a slightly later trip right now, so we can handle the peak demand for travel at that time. When we start to get more options than that, including more round trips, which would be phase 2 of SAC to Roseville, then we can start looking at some more off-peak times, such as maybe midday times and those kind of things. But right now, we'd probably, with the limited choices of 3 as opposed to 1, we'd probably want to bracket what we have today. That would be the approach. But it all remains to be seen. We have to see what the market's changing potentially with COVID. So we might want to do just 2 in the peak time and then do a reverse one. It all really depends, and we have the flexibility to do that. We're not locked into certain slots, but we do have to work out the future schedule with Union Pacific and all the other partners.
And Jim, we're thinking probably 2024-ish to start construction on that project. Is that right?
Yeah, 2024, 2025. And then it will take a couple years to get it done. And then, we can check that box and move on to phase 2 up in the Sac Roseville area.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. So now we'll go into the marketing and communications and actually customer experience in addition to that portion of the business plan. You'll see that we have various strategies and programs that we will be supporting throughout the next couple of years. And we just wanted to highlight some of those specific ones. So when you think about activating our destination partnerships, we're now in a phase where we can encourage people to travel. We want people to get back out on the train in a safe way, however they feel comfortable. And so you will start seeing us have some more destination-based marketing happening. We do plan on enhancing our customer experience. Over the years, we've just seen things evolve, where people would call or they'd write in, where they're really using channels like social media. They want, a little bit more technology-based solutions. And we are exploring more and more ways to be able to give 24-hour support to our customers as they call in, write in, or send us messages online. Cal ITP, it's going to be transformational for the whole state of California. And, we get the privilege of being able to kind of be, near first at bat when it comes to this. And so when we do launch that MVP, you can definitely expect that our team will be there to support and, manage, some of the communications that are happening, with regards to that program, as well as providing additional support as it evolves. And then you will see that, we've been doing a lot of research and, exploring some of the micro markets that have started to expose themselves throughout the pandemic. And of course, one of the things that we always have to focus on is building our brand. And working with Amtrak, it gives us that strength to be able to operate our service, but we also want to make sure that everyone knows when they're riding our train, it's the Capital Corridor train that they're riding. And we will look at different ways to be able to elevate our brand itself. Over to the right here, you see that we do focus very much on ridership growth and engagement. The reality of things are, we are still rebuilding our ridership, and we are going to have to try some new strategies to be able to bring our riders back. And we also do need to engage with our riders in a way that we haven't had to before. I think the pandemic has definitely encouraged us to create more digital channels for customers to be able to engage with us. Rob mentioned our CC Rewards loyalty program. That was something that we launched back in January 2020, and we definitely plan to continue to support and grow that program. We also launched Corridor Conversations in the fall of 2020, and this was a way to, again, connect with our riders who may not have been able to come back onto the train. So you can definitely look forward to seeing more of that in the coming years. In working with Caltrans, they did do a market segmentation study, and we will be using some of that to help influence and how we approach, marketing to new areas. One of the big shifts that we all are familiar with here in the Bay Area is that there was a massive amount of people moving around, some shuffling from metropolitan areas like San Francisco, moving out to places like Tahoe. I mean, at one point they started to run out of inventory. So we definitely want to, make sure that we can engage those riders as travel patterns have changed. Prior to the pandemic, people were riding on average 3 to 5 times a week, whereas now they may be 1 to 3 times a week. And so we have had to make some shifts, and we'll continue to monitor those and make sure that the fares that we're offering, the promotions that we're offering, align with this new market that we've come to realize. And then the leisure market as well will be a main focus for us. I think what we saw happen with the 49ers season has been very telling. People are willing to travel. The commuter market, things are different. They haven't been called back into the office just yet. But for those leisure trips, those riders are willing to travel. And I'm glad that we've been able to adjust our schedule as we needed to be able to support those riders. And then lastly, something else that we will be looking at is, of course, it's our 30th anniversary. We are going to celebrate this with you. And we have different activities that we have planned throughout the beginning of this year to really keep you engaged. And if you haven't taken advantage of our 30% discount just yet, please do. That is continuing on through the end of March. And then we do have some other Q&A that I will touch on, but just before we do that, I want to remind everyone that we do have a few different channels for you to provide comments. So if you have not submitted a comment during today's presentation, you can also submit a comment to the business plan on our website, capitalcorridor.org. You can send it via mail, or you can call us and leave us a message. All those submissions we do need to receive by Friday, January 21st. And so if you haven't done so, please do submit it. And then we also do have one additional workshop that will be taking place tomorrow at 5 p.m. So you can definitely join in on that presentation or let others know that they have another opportunity to join in. And again, we will address as many comments and questions as we can during our live presentations. They will be recorded. They will be part of our business plan follow-up. And then, of course, these presentations themselves will be available for streaming. I just want to look at some of the questions that have come in, and I will get those out there. Optimistically speaking, what is the best forecast you can give in working with Union Pacific to expand beyond the existing 7-day round trips to and from San Jose?
Well, I can take that. We are our first project to get set up for that is completing the South Bay Connect project. So as we get that sort of ball rolling down the hill, get the momentum going on that, then we need to engage with Union Pacific about actual concrete plans for expanding that. I would not foresee that we can realistically expand service possibly until after 2030 at the earliest. There's a lot of planning and project work that would have to be done to get to that phase. So it's it will take a big effort to expand south. It's a challenging territory to work in. There's wetlands, and that is one of the things we're aware of that we need to work through. But there's also a lot of single track territory once you get through the Alviso wetlands. So that's a relatively easy place to construct in, but it's the wetlands area that's going to be very challenging to work through. And we also, sea level rise and climate change is here. We need to look at what we need to do to adapt the rail line in that territory as well, because the sad story is that the track will one day be underwater at certain points, and that's not so good for operations.
Thanks, Jim. We had a marketing question come in. How would you describe Capital Corridor's brand voice or main personality traits? I think we would all agree, and Rob, feel free to chime in here, but one thing that Capital Corridor we're very proud of is that, we are a convenient service. We are a service that really thinks about our riders. our riders have a lot of influence as they're advocates for everything that we do. And we really try to position that in everything that we do with regards to, our customer touch points. This includes, how we support our customers online, activities that we do, prior to COVID, of course, we would do our rider appreciation events on board the train, or Cappy Hour, if you remember them. We want to be thought of as fun, convenient, approachable. I think those are all the key attributes that we've always focused on. Rob, any follow-up to that?
And flexible. I think that's the other word we often use.
Yes,
well, I mean, we want to get back to the place where we were, which is we were a real community, and a lot of our riders ride together all the time, and it is a fun service. It's a much better way to go if you're going to Sacramento or down to Oakland from Sacramento than driving. And we want it to be a high quality service, flexible, and a real community, and we will get back to that.
Great. I do have a question, and this may be for either Rob or Leo, but to save on costs and to be penny wise, do you anticipate eliminating the high cost Emeryville to San Francisco bus while working collaboratively with BART to staff or promote the use of the Red Line for one seat rides between Richmond and San Francisco International Airport, as well as the Blue Line and Green Lines between Coliseum and San Francisco Daly City? The throughway bus will eventually seem redundant and not get use of operating or capital funds.
You know what? I'll start on that and then have Leo add to it. In terms of our bus connections, we actually have a lot of bus connections. The Emeryville is one of the many bus connections we have. And historically, we have hired third parties, so it's been private contractors that provide that connection. And we've actually been limited in our ability to provide what's called open door service, which means anybody could get on the bus who was in that corridor. And there was a change in state law that opened that up and made that a little bit more flexible. And so we've recently partnered with El Dorado Transit to provide a connection between Sacramento and South Lake Tahoe. And that service is open to anyone. So you do not need to be on the rail line for part of that trip. You can actually get on in Sacramento and go to El Dorado, or you can get on Placerville and go to South Lake Tahoe. And so that opens up a lot of opportunities, and we want to look for other places to do that because it's more cost effective and it provides better mobility to our customers. In the Bay Area, and this connection between Emeryville and San Francisco, our hope is that, and we were working on this pre-pandemic, is that service could eventually be provided by AC Transit, and again, open to our customers, and also to those who are local, who live in Emeryville and need to get to San Francisco. So we do want to do that. And then lastly, I'll say that the schedule change was intended in part that connection at Richmond easier. We agree that's the most cost-effective way for people to travel. The BART service already exists. And the more we can encourage people to take that connection at Richmond and make that a comfortable connection for Richmond, the more cost-effective our service delivery is going to be on the bus side. And Leo, I may have covered it, but is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think the only thing that I'll say is that we worked before with AC Transit on trying to see if we could make that Emeryville to San Francisco connection possible via their service. So I think that what we know is that the pandemic created a lot of challenges to being able to do that. And we're definitely at a good time to explore that with them again. So we'll definitely explore that again and see if we can come back with some positive news on that side.
Great, thank you. We did have a question about the cafe car. So specifically, does Amtrak plan to address either the reduction of plastics in their food service on trains by looking at compostable or easily recyclable glass or aluminum options? And I'll start off, and if anyone else has anything to add, please feel free. About 2 or 3 years ago, Amtrak really started to look at sustainability as far as, how they handle their food delivery. And so we did see some of that come into play for California. Long distance experience is definitely different, when it comes to the menu items. For California, we've made a concerted effort to really look at sourcing sustainable products or working with businesses who have sustainable practices. And so a lot of our sourcing really is focused on California. And of course, that does mean that we are looking at packaging and making sure that the materials are recyclable. You probably have seen some shifts from even some of our beer offerings. We've gone from glass to aluminum cans. In some instances, it's a supply chain issue. In others, it's to reduce some waste or any type of condemnage. So I think that the pandemic is definitely putting pressure on us to look at those things, but we're also working with some of the supply chain issues. So as we come out of this, I think we'll see even more options as a result, but it definitely is something that we consider. And then
I would just say, if you want Capital Corridor to focus on that, and this comment's going to be going to our board, it's great to see it. So Marcus has been really active in that area, and I know is personally really supportive of it. So we will keep doing that, but we like the reinforcement of that as a goal among our customers. So appreciate the comment.
And then we do have another marketing question, which I'll tackle. Has Capital Corridor considered using a social media influencer to ride the train and encourage followers to use Capital Corridor and highlight the benefits and the aesthetic views from riding the train? We've done that before. We have had someone come on and do a blog for us all about riding the train. And we are currently working with our social media and advertising team to really think about how we position ourselves from a social media perspective and what's going to be most important and, quite frankly, in alignment with growing ridership. So we will see, perhaps some shifts in some of our approaches than what we've done in the past, but it definitely is something that we are considering. Thank you for that one. I have one last question that I see that's in the queue right now. So if you do have something else that you want to question us about, please do use the Q&A feature. And Rob, I'm going to send this over to you. And I know it's a marketing one, but I just want to get your reaction. Would you consider using the copy or language Corey do's and Corey don'ts on the train and some physical signage and maybe our marketing materials or digital assets?
We have a creative passenger or customer, I think, who's participating. I think I'll say that. And Corey, if maybe tell everybody who Corey is, Marcus.
So Corey is our newest mascot for our train. Cappy, you've probably seen over the years. We added Corey. If you haven't seen Corey just yet, visit railgoods.com. We'll drop that in the chat. That's our online company store. So you can pick up your own Corey today if you would like. But those are kind of the fun faces of Capital Corridor. And as far as whether we'll be using Corey do's and don'ts, I kind of like it. So stay tuned.
I kind of like it. I kind of like it too.
Yeah.
Corey says, wear your mask. We'll start with that.
Absolutely. We want to keep health and safety first, especially in this climate.
That's a great idea.
It looks like that's all of our questions today. If anyone else has any other comments or questions,
Mike wants us to steal Bart's ugly sweater idea, I think.
Who knows what may come down the chimney from Santa? 2022 is definitely going to have a lot of new things in store for us. So stay tuned.
Hey, thanks to everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And if you have another question, we have another session tomorrow afternoon, and then and you can leave comments. So please do. We'll submit all those. We'll show all those comments to our board. So if something comes to mind tonight, just go on and please share it with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to our panelists today. Thank you everyone who has participated. Again, Friday, January 21st is when we need to receive all those comments. As Rob mentioned, your comments, your feedback really do influence the decisions that we make for our service in the long and short term. So we appreciate everyone joining today. And we do look forward to seeing you on the train soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.